Thank you for joining us at the Atlantic Council IMF pop-up studio, where we will be talking about AI and the policy advice that the IMF can bring to policymaker in terms of AI. With me is here today Dabla-Norris, Deputy Director at the Fiscal Affairs Department at the IMF, and Giovanni Melina, Deputy Chief Director at the IMF Research Department. And as I said, we will be talking a little bit about AI. We are halfway through the annual meetings. Today it's Wednesday, and it seems like AI is pretty high on the agenda. The word AI has been mentioned at the World Economic Outlook 41 times, so definitely quite something to talk about. But I would like to start from the beginning and ask the question, why even IMF is thinking about AI, why it allocates so many resources to the research, because when you think about the IMF, when you learn about the IMF at school, it's kind of like a lender of last resort, countries coming to the IMF to avoid the default. So what the AI is doing in this mix?
Well, the IMF also does surveillance, and it also does capacity development, just to put it out there. But let me sort of step back and say what AI could potentially do. So it could potentially have a real transformative effect on economies in terms of boosting productivity, boosting growth. But at the same time, it also poses risks. It poses risks to labor markets, to inequality, to rising inequality, and to financial stability, just to name a few. So take the implications for productivity and growth. This could massively change the structure of economies, competitiveness of economies, and would have an implication for incomes, for consumptions, for savings behaviors, for fiscal accounts. All of these are macro variables across the membership. Think about inequality. AI could widen inequality both within and across countries. So workers that are more technologically savvy could become more productive, their wages could increase at the risk of leaving others behind. Countries that are more technologically advanced could gain more, and the income gaps across countries could emerge or increase even further. And so this could have implications for aggregate demand patterns. This could have implications for the type of policy frameworks that are required. Or take financial stability, right? Could have lots of positive effects in terms of risk management in financial systems, but also create systemic vulnerabilities on account of herding behavior or correlated market movements. So from all of these perspectives, the fact that it's not just a tech in favor, it's something that's a general purpose technology that could have potentially far-reaching macroeconomic and financial stability implications, and that requires attention, that requires policy engagement.
And that's also not the first time when the IMF is thinking about AI. Those are not the first meeting. Actually, 2 years ago, IMF launched something called AI Preparedness Index, when it ranks countries how prepared they are for the upcoming AI. Can you talk a little bit more about this index and what it measures and how it puts countries into different buckets and perspectives?
Of course, yeah. I mean, we, with the AI Preparedness Index, we cover almost our whole membership, and the index is meant to measure readiness for AI adoption in countries. And given that AI is a profoundly multifaceted phenomenon, the index is on purpose quite broad. We looked both at what we consider foundational AI preparedness that has to do with digital infrastructure, with the presence of digital skills, human capital, but also a more advanced level of preparedness that has to do with the presence of ecosystem that foster innovation and also the integration of digital technologies in productive systems. And also regulation and ethics that foster trust in the technology and the best use of it. And if we look at the big picture, what we see is that advanced economies, not very surprisingly, are at the top of this ranking, as you mentioned, while on the other end of the spectrum we have mostly low-income countries, and also if we look at the subcomponents of the AI preparedness index, what we see is that advanced economies typically are very well prepared in what we call foundational elements. So they have a very good digital infrastructure already, comparatively speaking. They have very good levels of human capital. So they should focus mostly on the innovation aspects and the regulation, while on the other end of the spectrum, low-income countries still have a lot of work to do on these foundational elements to boost readiness in basics like energy access, internet coverage, or even computers and mobile phones, all this stuff.
But I would assume that requires a lot of capital. We're all hearing all these big deals, big investment announcements for all major companies related to AI business, and where the low-income countries can access that kind of capital, where they can look for money to catch up to advanced economies.
Maybe I could just jump in here. I mean, I think, as Giovanni said, the issue for low-income countries is really adoption. So the foundational component of AI is really having the workforce skills, having the digital infrastructure in place. So that's sort of paramount. And then the question is, how do you pay for this? Because many of these countries also have limited fiscal space. And here I should say that the fiscal monitor that was released today has an answer. It says spend smarter. Right? So countries could spend more wisely, in the sense that, our fiscal monitor finds that 1% of GDP reallocation, say from untargeted subsidies or from government overhead, administrative overhead, that is using the existing resources, that is reallocated to, say, public investment, you read digital infrastructure or along those lines, along with increasing the efficiency of the spending, could boost output, long-run output, by 11%. So that's not a small number. And so that means that you create the capabilities by just reprioritizing existing spending. And I think we should also emphasize that AI itself could be used as a way to strengthen government operations, the way you collect revenues, the way you provide digital services to your people. So in a sense, low-income countries have the ability to leapfrog because there's tremendous potential. And by spending smarter and using AI in a very purposeful way, they can do that.
And bringing back the AI preparedness index, I think the main outcome of the study was that jobs in advanced economies are a little bit more affected by the AI rather than emerging markets. So also that's kind of like a job for advanced economies to think how to protect jobs, right? We have this new study coming up from Stanford University talking about this quite significant, over 10% drop in AI-exposed entry-level jobs. So how we should think about protecting our jobs, because that's also quite significant, talking about the fiscal side of it, and income for the country, the personal income tax. It's a big part of every country's budget. So if we are start losing money there, how we should think about it. Also, all the if we're gonna have people that are being replaced by AI, we need to think about all the social safety nets for them, and that's also probably gonna be very costly.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. And actually, Giovanni's study, maybe you could talk a little bit about the data, and I'm happy to talk about the fiscal side of things.
Yeah, just to put some numbers, we estimate that 40% of employment worldwide is exposed to AI, and exposed means both good things and potentially bad things, in the sense that about half of this employment may actually benefit from AI adoption, because it could boost workers' productivity, but also about half risk, and they risk wage losses, they risk job losses, and so on and so forth. And this 40% actually becomes 60% in advanced economies. So this means that advanced economies have both higher potential to benefit from AI adoption, but also face higher risk. While low-income countries, on the other end, they in the immediate future, they face fewer risk, but also they may risk the missing the train of productivity boost if they don't catch up with this preparedness that we were talking about.
And then I think just to add, I mean, I'm very strongly of the view that there's a lot of uncertainty, both in terms of how large the productivity gains from AI will be, and the timeline or the horizon over which they will materialize, and how truly disruptive the labor market costs could be. I mean, these are exposure numbers that isn't necessarily tantamount to people getting unemployed, but I think it's important here to underscore that policymakers must be prepared for both positive scenarios, or sort of the business as usual scenarios, and the more disruptive ones. And from that perspective, going back to the question that you asked, what does that mean? Well, countries can do two things. First is really consider whether or not or how they should upgrade existing social protection systems, education systems, training systems. How do they need to upgrade them in a world of AI? The second component of that is to say, well, are our tax systems excessively favoring AI, automation? And our research that was published last year shows that for some countries, the tax systems may be favoring automation over labor. Now, providing tax incentives for innovation, or depreciation allowances, tax credits for innovation is a good thing. But too much or excess of it can be inefficient and can actually run the risk of displacing labor. Now, does that mean that we should have a robot tax? I think that's a question that we're always asked. Should we have a robot tax to stem this? And the answer to that is no. I mean, we don't.
The question is, who's going to be the first one to tax
robots? I think the point here is that it's really hard to define. You can't tax something that you can't define what the base is, right? So it's really challenging, and you run the risk of stifling innovation. So we've been advocating that we want to encourage innovation, encourage adoption, and we want to do it in a balanced way so that the human AI capabilities can be enhanced. And you can only do that by investing appropriately in social protection systems, in education systems, in training systems. So this is sort of a package deal, if you will.
Yeah, that's great. So one of your working papers actually, and that's kind of bringing it from the beginning of our conversation, says that the AI, if done correctly, could boost global productivity growth from 0% to 1.5% annually. That's massive, especially right now when we have pretty sluggish growth. Gladly revise upwards a little bit from 3.0 to 3.2, but if we all do it correctly, another 1.5.
Yeah, but we still have to qualify these numbers. I mean, I think three aspects get into the picture when we talk about these numbers, and this has to do with exposure to AI, what we discussed, that also extend to the sectoral structure of countries, the level of preparedness of countries, and also the level of access to cutting-edge technology, hardware, software, and also alliances with the countries that can provide all these technological flows. And again, here we see that advanced economies score much better than low-income countries. So if we talk about preparedness, on average, advanced economies score about double low-income countries, and so the growth effect, the GDP growth effect that may stem from that, may be very different across the income spectrum. And for advanced economies, we estimate that even in the best scenarios that you were talking about before, the growth impact for advanced economies may be double, actually more than double the impact for low-income countries. And so in this respect, boosting preparedness in emerging and developing economies is crucial to actually shrink the gap between advanced and emerging markets economies.
it's kind of what we're seeing right now, but kind of in reverse, because we see emerging markets growing much faster than advanced economies. So I kind of like, it's counterintuitive to think about, India growing 6% versus US around 2%. And here, I think in the US, we have a little bit more deeper, maybe I shouldn't say US, but maybe more in advanced economies, we are better prepared for the AI versus the emerging markets, and still the growth is lagging in emerging markets, in advanced economies.
I think the issue is sort of convergence. The lower you are away from the technology frontier, and Philippe Aghion won the Nobel Prize precisely for this kind of thinking, the further you are from the technology frontier, the greater distance you have to catch up, so the faster your growth is. But as you start approaching the technology frontier, your growth starts slowing. Now, AI could be a game changer, because it's, in a sense, it's like pushing the frontier even further, if you see what I mean. So the farther the frontier goes, and the gap between the technology frontier and where emerging market and developing economies are, many of them, could widen. And I think that's the concern that you have. So that's the potential gains that could happen. And of course, the numbers are all over the place, really, really high numbers to sort of more moderate numbers that we've come up with. By the same token, you could also have significant labor market disruptions, as Giovanni pointed out. And so then, going back to this the question that
30% of jobs negatively impacted in advanced economies, that would be unthinkable almost.
Yeah, so then kind of goes back to the question of, what does it mean from government's perspective to be prepared, right? And here, I think you need a combination of both urgency and vision, right? Urgency because there's a possibility that workers could be displaced and you want to buffer that shock. Mm-hmm. And vision because you want to invest strategically, even advanced economies, you want to invest strategically to make sure that workers are prepared for the jobs of the future. Mm-hmm. Right? What does that mean? It means three things. First, it means that countries need to think about how to upgrade their current social protection systems, to expand the generosity and coverage of unemployment insurance systems. Right? Currently, only 17% of unemployed people around the world have access to any kind of benefits. And even in advanced economies, you have a lot of fragmentation in the sense that these benefits, unemployment insurance benefits, are fragmented along occupational lines. So if you're a new labor market entrant or you're a temporary worker, you don't receive any unemployment insurance. And for most, there's sort of a time bound. How long can you receive the benefits, right? So expanding this coverage, countries will have to think about how to expand the coverage. The second point is social assistance systems. Now, imagine a world where you have very prolonged job losses that transcends. So you have like structural unemployment, goes beyond 6 months or 12 months, but people remain unemployed for long. You need a completely different system. You need to adapt your system of social.
I would like to bring one number here.
Okay, please.
3.2 billion people on the planet right now live in the countries where the government are spending more money for debt servicing costs than for healthcare and education combined. So it seems like fiscal space and interest rates on debt are being one of the main issues for finance ministers right now. So and now we're talking about expanding generosity of the social safety nets, and where would this money come from?
Yeah, no, I think that there's one more component to this which is important. So it's not just about social protection. There's another component which is about investments in education and training, and here you need to think about the kind of skills that will be needed for the jobs of the future, and the governments can't do this alone. This is a critical area where public-private partnerships are really, really important to understand what will be the demand for skills going forward. And that doesn't necessarily have to cost money. It just requires better coordination and understanding of what kind of training programs are needed in a world where AI is going to be more ubiquitous. So that's one component. The second is, going back to what I mentioned about spending smarter. Right? It's not necessarily always about spending more or increasing the scale of spending. It's just reprioritizing in terms of where would you like to spend and being much more efficient in the way you spend. And here, as I said, AI itself could be a game changer in terms of increasing the efficiency of government spending, increasing the efficiency with which governments collect revenues.
So the spending, it's one thing, but also the infrastructure, right? Especially access to energy infrastructure. We, of course, all would like to have it in a clean energy, but I think that was also one of the IMF studies that the energy requirements to power the AI, it's almost equal some countries, right? And it's projected to, in 2030, to surpass France energy demands.
Yeah, actually,
India.
by 2030,
It would be
it's going to be India,
It would be India,
which is the
is
third
like
largest
the third largest in the world. So
energy consumer
that's
in the world.
huge.
Yeah. Yeah, and actually we estimate that we did some simulations to see what the impact on energy prices may be, and what we find is that if supply responds fast enough, then the energy surges, the surges in prices are going to be manageable. But if there are delays in supply catching up with demand, then the price surges may be substantial, and this may hurt both consumers, but also businesses, especially in sectors that are energy intensive. And so it is important to leverage all sorts of energy sources, including obviously clean energy sources and renewables, because with the cut in the cost of renewables, that in the reduction in the cost of renewables that we've seen, this may help both with the price increases and also with emissions.
Oh, so we see that, from Minister of Finance to Minister of Education to Minister of Energy and probably many other ministers, it's agenda for everybody. So I would like to ask one and my last and my favorite question. We are here at the IMF and the World Bank annual meetings. We have policymakers from all over the world. If you could give him one advice, what would that be?
I would say prepare. Be prepared. Think about different scenarios so that you're not caught left-footed. There's tremendous opportunities that AI could potentially provide. How to seize them responsibly while mitigating the adverse impacts, I think would be the most important thing.
Giovanni?
I think also, be aware of the risks, but also be aware of one specific risk, which is the risk of missing out. And so the fact that AI can still be a game changer, and it should be leveraged for the good of humanity.
Well, Ira, Giovanni, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you, Bart.
Thank you for joining us at our IMF studio. Today is our last event, but make sure to tune in tomorrow at 9 a.m. We will be starting with our morning briefing, when you can find all the highlights for the upcoming day. During the day, we also will be talking with the Ukrainian finance minister, as well as we will be analyzing outlook for China's economy with Brad Sesser, and we'll be talking about the UK monetary policy with Megan Green. And here at the IMF, you can watch the debate on the global economy. Thank you for joining us. Good night.